Millie and David, if you would start with some introductions to the group. You probably know more than people here, but they should know what you do, how they connected to you, and how, if you would share a little bit about how you come to this work. How you come to
Okay, I'll start. Most of you know me. My name is Millie Kakani. I'm the Director of Youth Justice at Children's Defense Fund California. Where do I even start? I hate talking about myself. I hate this question. I was a public school teacher in the Bronx for a couple of years. Went to law school, ended up as a public defender back in the Bronx because that place is so special, and found too many of my students back in the courtroom. And so I came back west because I was tired of living in a third floor walk-up in a building where there was no washer dryer. And so we moved back to California, and I landed at a place called Public Counsel, where I was doing direct legal services for young people who were aging out of foster care and probation. The collateral consequences that come from being raised by a system are far too many. And it is system after system that does not value Black and brown love, Black and brown humanity, Black and brown families. And so after that, I ended up at Children's Defense Fund working in the youth justice space, hoping to change, transform experiences of young people and their families so that they never have to come into contact with these systems that do not value them. And so that is what brings me to this work, hoping to bring joy or be a part of the joy that every young person deserves to experience. I'll pass it to you, David.
All right, thank you, Millie. I was strategic. I didn't want to follow Starsky. I've had to do that a few times. Never a good place to be. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Carroll. He, him, his pronouns. I'm the director of the Department of Youth Development for LA County. I know quite a few people in the room, which is really exciting. I'm a transplant to LA, so I moved here about 8 years ago from St. Louis, where Starsky and I actually worked very closely together for a number of years. In fact, over, 25 years ago, and I say Starsky because at the time he was not Reverend Dr. Wilson, he was Starsky.
Still Starsky.
Still Starsky. And he was a young leader with the Urban League Young Professionals. And I think I had been the first president, and I think you may have been like the second or third, something like that. He was as fired up then as he is now. At the time I was in corporate, right? I had grown up in every program that you could possibly imagine, from the foster care system, adoptive care system, every outreach. Every time I fell down, there was some caring adult to pick me up, right? Whether it was a fraternity or whether it was a school, or so many people put their arms around me and said, go to school, graduate, stay out of trouble. Didn't always do great on the staying out of trouble side. Get a job and give back to your community, right? And while Starsky, 25 years ago, was already pressing for justice and liberation, I was just kind of treading, the water, right? I had this corporate job, but I was trying to volunteer and mentor and coach. And it wasn't until I was the victim of a violent crime. 2 kids, put a gun to the side of my head, and that was a wake-up call. That happened on a Monday. I quit my corporate job on that Friday, started working at the YMCA with young people. Oddly enough, a few years later, worked for an organization that was in a family with an organization that Starsky was leading, the Deaconess Foundation. I worked for an organization called Neighborhood Houses, serving young people, and have been doing that work, again, for about 20 years. Have not had a day yet that I don't feel like coming to work. And that's because I know that what we do matters, and it changes the lives of young people in the way that adults changed my life. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. When I started, I was trying to make a difference in one young person's life. And now to have the ability to serve 2 million young people in LA County is just an amazing opportunity and responsibility. What the department does, just to give you just a snapshot, the goal is to keep young people out of the criminal legal system, and for the young people who are in the system to reduce the depth of their involvement. So we were born out of community. We're a very, very unique department in that community came together, they advocated, they pressured the Board of Supervisors, and they created us to reimagine how young people are treated by the criminal legal system. Expanding beyond that, we recognize that the best way to serve young people in the criminal system is for them never to go in the first place, right? So a big part of our work is on the development side, again, providing opportunities for young people, and on the other side, for young people who are in the system, we provide diversion, which gives a young person an opportunity to go through a restorative practice and eliminate that thing that they were in trouble for, that they came into negative contact with law enforcement. Further down the line, we work in the facilities, in the camps, in the halls, providing mentorship through a program called Credible Messenger, and other wraparound programs that young people just want to do, right? Whether it's art or physical recreation or sports or financial literacy, job preparation, all things that a young person would be doing in community if they weren't behind bars in these cases. So happy to be here and looking forward to more of the questions.
Thank you, Mike. So one of the things we come to believe in the national conversation, kind of the national public policy and public affairs conversation, and plays out within Children's Defense Fund's history, is that California is really a vision of the future. What happens here happens first, and it translates across the rest of the country because of the demographics, because of some of the politics, because there are some things that are just more possible here, because of the diversity. And so, if you would share a little bit of what's going on, let the rest of us who came in on a plane peek into the future by telling us what is happening, most pressing, whether it's a policy concern or whether it's whether it has to do with programmatic matters. What are the most pressing matters that you see for young people here in California?
That's a great question, and I think a great introduction, because so many folks from outside of California, maybe even within California, find themselves thinking that this is the place where things are different, right? Kind of as you had opened with, that this is the place where all young folks have a shot. This is the place where fewer young folks are coming into contact with the system. This is the place where young people are dealing with the least amount of trauma by way of system. And that honestly could not be further from the truth. And it's a really hard reality to confront, because we still, as a county, spend the most on incarcerating our young people in comparison to every other jurisdiction in this country. We spend over $500 million to cage our young people. $500 million. There are only about 500 young people in our carceral facilities in LA, so we are willing to spend $1 million a year to put kids in a cage. Not willing to spend $1 million on their joy, on their freedom, on their liberation, on their success, on their dreams, right? On the possibilities. That feels like the most pressing issue to me, that we can't seem to get around our obsession with caging Black and brown children. Our obsession with calling their missteps irredeemable, and the only response is to put them in a cage. That's our response to responding to this need for public safety. And it's a really hard battle to fight. And I shout out to our team, Aditi and Lena, because that is day in, day out, that the narrative that we are challenging, the dollars that we are challenging, the unions that we are challenging, the narrative that we are challenging is this idea that caging a young person is better than investing in their freedom.
I don't even know where to start. Thank you, Millie. First of all, that was a phenomenal response. I think that there's so many pressing issues. So, I second everything that Millie said, but I certainly want to highlight, I think, hope and the absence of hope is the most pressing issue. The young people that I work with, they don't see a future where they are thriving for themselves. And it breaks my heart when I have those conversations. And that's because they haven't had a chance to explore, and they haven't had access to the resources and the opportunities that teach them what they like, right? What they love and what they're passionate about. And that's what I want to provide, right? Is opportunities for that exploration. So you find that one thing that you fall in love with that then drives the rest of your actions and helps you to make better decisions because you don't want to miss out on that thing that you love. So I don't think that a lot of our young people have had that opportunity. It's hard to dream and to hope when you don't have the resources to eat, right? Or when you're sleeping in a car, or when you have your mother has a boyfriend that is abusive. So when they come around, you go somewhere else, right? And whether that be sleeping on the street or to someone else's house, you can't hope and dream when you're dealing with like these really grown up issues, right? As a young person. So I think that's the biggest thing is helping to instill that sense of hope for a bright future, right? For young people. Very, I guess simply, I'm really concerned about the pendulum shift, and I try to be careful with that term because it implies that the pendulum at one point was way over on the side towards social justice, which we know it wasn't, right? But it was closer, and it is has shifted to a much more heavy-handed approach towards how we respond to young people when they make mistakes. And I'm worried. I'm worried about another George Floyd. I'm worried about the jails refilling with young people and adults. I'm worried about what happens in our upcoming election for a district attorney. We have situations right now where young people are being, asked to agree to some of the terms that would incarcerate them, but to prevent something worse from happening if the current district attorney happens to be replaced with a person who, for example, may start charging everyone that is 17 or older as an adult, whereas that has not been happening at the frequency that it used to happen. So that's a very, just kind of technical concern, but hope is definitely at the base of what I believe.
No, thank you both. I mean, one of the things you talk about, I'm going to borrow a term from the health space to apply what I think I'm hearing. So at some level, really I'm hearing about a lack of Darnell Moore, who's a remarkable and brilliant writer and creative, but also one of kind of the leading voices in the movement for Black Lives, talks about us caging people because we lack imagination. And so when you talk about us, that's the best we can come up with, is that we don't have a better system. We can't conjure a better way for public safety than to cage young people. I hear Darnell speaking to me about our lack of imagination, which gets directly to our lack of imagination, connects with this inability for young people to hope and to dream, right? And so I rewind to our kind of shift at CDF and our language about our mission, that we can't have a mission that's about the child only and their well-being without opening the aperture to think about the community. So last year we shifted our mission to say that we were building communities so young people grow up with dignity, hope, and joy. But a young person's not going to have joy if you don't have any imagination. A young person's not going to have any joy if you can't get your politics right. This is where I want to borrow a term. A scholar by the name of Daniel Dawes has advanced our language around social determinants of health, and he talks about political determinants of health. He suggests that the social conditions that we know impact young people's health and well-being are directly impacted by the political circumstances and people being willing to wield political power on their behalf. Is based on who's the district attorney and what are they doing with that office and how much are they helping. As we think about this concept of child well-being here, how much I made some broad allusions to political machinations and movement here in California. What will be the critical moves? I'm going to talk about power in a minute, so I'm trying to set it up. What are the most consequential political moves that will be made in the next, I'll give it 48 months, because I know somebody announcing for governor 3 years out, right? So as we look at the horizon, what are some of the most consequential political realities we need to pay attention to in California, because they will impact young people down the line?
I think first and foremost, all politics are local, right? So I think the structures that are in place that are most directly connected to young people. So the DA, for example, that is a huge concern, again, because, that philosophy and that theory can change dramatically the way that young people are treated. I think that there is, at least it feels like, I'm curious to hear Millie's response, but it feels that the state assembly and Senate are becoming less progressive. We are pushing legislation around mandatory diversion, for example. So a young person comes into contact with law enforcement. If it's a certain type of infraction, they automatically get diversion, right? Right now, we know that young black men are offered diversion disproportionately lower rates than other young people, right? That's from a study that we recently did with our diversion program, which also shows that only 5% of young people are reoffending that go through diversion, right? 95% are not coming back into law enforcement. So we want to make sure that everyone has access to diversion. We can't get anyone to pick up the bill, right? To make that legislation. The appetite is not there in Sacramento for things that could be perceived as opposite of public safety, right? Although we know that youth development is public safety, right? So that is a big concern of mine. So, starting super hyper local, looking at council seats and looking at boards of supervisors, DA, but then going sheriff, right? We've got, there was a major shift in the sheriff situation here from, a few years ago, which you may be familiar with, but then going to the state and really looking at, having the right people in place that are willing to take the risks that are necessary for kids to have the opportunities they need to thrive.
Were you going to ask a follow-up question?
I was going to ask, just shifting to the state, either what's the office, or, I'm looking for friends and targets. So what would be who's best positioned to do that, to be that kind of voice? Either the personality, we want to talk personalities. Are there particular offices that we need to pay attention to?
So I'm not going to answer your question at all. Because
you know what needs to be done.
What we have realized in this last year, in trying to pass even the most simplest legislation, where CDF was co-sponsor to legislation of trying to shift every county has this board. It's called the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, right? LA gets a ton of money, $40 million a year to invest in the prevention of young people coming into contact with the system. And we are trying to mandate that 50% of the seats on this council in every community is made up of community. That bill got killed. Why are people so afraid of community? And so, when you're talking about who should we be paying attention to, we need to be paying attention to people. We need to be building up our people power. Because all of these electeds, all of these people who are sitting in positions of power have decided to prioritize their power over people. Every single one of them. Whether it's our board of supervisors, whether it's our assembly folks, whether it's our senators, whether it's our governor, right? It is about maintaining our power. And it is not at all about being accountable to the people. This bill would have done nothing in terms of taking power away from law enforcement, there's no harm to having community make up just half. We're not even the majority, right? And that was a threat. that was a threat to power. And so who should we be paying attention to? I don't know that it matters. I think we need to have more folks filling up every assembly hearing, every Senate hearing, every Board of Supervisors meeting, every City Council meeting, calling out our electeds in the way they are prioritizing their power over people.
Thank you. Now, I'm total agreement. I want to dig in and maybe get an example around the work with the Layup Coalition. Where have you seen this happen? Where have you seen, because people need to see a thing, right? Where have we seen this happen, maybe in one instance that we can build on? And it's helpful to hear it because I also talk to philanthropy and foundations, and they say, well, you know, I talked to one foundation leader, he's like, man, there's so much money in organizing in California, there's so much money in power building in California, I don't even fund there anymore because there are other foundations doing the work. I hear that either there's not, or there's a disconnect between the resources invested and the mobilization expected. So if you would tell me a little bit about some success stories where you've seen that happen with the community, and what might be some of the gaps. Now, maybe it's funding, maybe there are other coordination gaps or organizing gaps that we need to fill to make that happen.
You know, it's amazing, the progression of the questions, because I was thinking of an example before you even asked that question that involved layup. First of all, I will say that from our organizer friends in the room, there's certainly not enough resources. I talk to them all the time about compensating young people for their time, compensating young adults for their time, and you know, folks struggling, you know, just to keep the lights on and have a cell phone, right? So I would not agree with the fact that there's enough or too much funding for organizing. But the Layup Coalition, I work with consistently, some of whom are in the room today. During our budget cycle, the Department of Youth Development was granted one position of the 50 or so that we asked for, right? There's three phases to the budget. I don't want to bore everyone, but there's a recommended, then there's a final, and then there's a supplemental. The Layup Coalition organized young people, went door to door to each one of the supervisors' offices throughout the course of a whole day. We ended up receiving 37 of the 50 positions that we asked for. And that would not have happened without community and primarily young people. And I feel like, Lena, you were there, that day. So, you know, I can't be thankful enough. And for the young people, the impact that they know that they had is driving them to continue to stay involved. You know, at the base, we wouldn't even be a department if it wasn't for coalitions like Layup and others, right? So we are indebted to community and heavily community involved. You know, the vast majority of my time is spent with community organizations in various convenings, whether they be providers or advocates or organizers. So that's one concrete example.
That's great.
I'm just going to take a step back. Most folks know, but in case you don't, Layup is the Los Angeles Youth Uprising Coalition. Started out in 2016, trying to shift a little bit of power away from probation. We are made up of 17 different orgs, but there are 5 coordinating orgs. Children's Defense Fund is one of them. Actually, now it's 4 coordinating orgs, but Children's Defense Fund is one of them. We've been there from the start. Our goal is to lift up the stories and experiences of young people who have been impacted by the system, to call for the system to look different, to be different. And so this coalition of folks have banded together for some time. And I want to give a shout out to the coalition because we are the reason that the Department of Youth Development exists. The county was kind of waffling. They're like, maybe we can fix probation one more time. It is because of the Los Angeles Youth Uprising Coalition that we had a Board of Supervisors say that probation is a fundamentally flawed system. We cannot reform our way out of it. We need to reimagine something different. It is because of Layup that Youth Justice Reimagined became a thing. It is because of the stories of Ronnie Vieva, who was standing in the back, right? That there was some accountability, that the system felt like it needed to check itself, right? And so when the county was like, oh, we won't create a Department of Youth Development, we'll just do an office, right? There's this whole hierarchy in the county. There's a department, there's an office, there's a division, and the lower you go, the less power you have. And so they're like, we'll give you an Office of Youth Development. Community showed up, Layup showed up, and they were like, we will not take an office. We want a department. We want a seat at the table. We want to shift the power. Because right now it is just law enforcement that has a seat at the table. We want community to have a seat at the table. And that's what the Department of Youth Development is. That's what it aims to be. We strive to hold it accountable. I mean, it is, yeah, so there are wins. I shouldn't dismiss those things. So thank you for the reminder.
No, I appreciate you shining the light, right? Because even that structure is an intervention. That youth development language is an intervention into a probation conversation. It is an intervention into a delinquency conversation, into a juvenile justice conversation. And we need those interventions. My question is, where else do we need that?
Yeah. Everywhere?
So I'm wrapping back to these priorities, right? And thinking about the work that CDF California is doing, and I'm trying to think about next, right? This is something that the rest of the country can continue to learn from. I know there are a couple of offices we talked about in New York doing some similar work here and exploring in different ways, but clearly something that could translate in other places. But also, there may be other areas where we need to be thoughtful about, to be true to this conversation about youth advocacy and voice. Where might we need to provide additional supports and infrastructure so that that kind of accountability, that kind of imagination, and that kind of power can be amplified from young people's voices to impact their lives?
So I mean, every single system, right, is by and large rooted in white supremacy. Every single system has a role in silencing the voices of Black and brown young people, their families, community. And so I think about the way each of these systems is directly connected to the next, right? Whether it is the education system, the youth justice system, our public health system, our homelessness and housing system, right? Like each of these systems touches the young people. When we go inside juvenile, I hate calling them halls and camps because it makes them sound like these glorious spaces. They are not halls, they are not camps, they are juvenile caging facilities. When we go inside these juvenile caging facilities and have the opportunity to talk to young people, they're never saying it's one thing, right? They're never saying that it's, I got into a fight and then here we are. They're talking about the fact that, my mom was incarcerated. I was in foster care. We were unhoused. I didn't get to see a doctor for 4 years. My mom didn't have status in this country, so we were scared to call for help. The list goes on and on. So it's hard to, I think that's part of the problem, is that we end up siloing these systems. So there isn't a collective accountability. When in fact, all of these systems are working in connection with one another to kind of prevent the joy that young people deserve to have. So I think if there was a way for us to kind of come into a room and bring in the health justice folks, bring in the economic justice folks, bring in the ed justice folks, the environmental justice folks, it would be such a beautiful collaboration and opportunity to learn because there is so much that is connected and vital for us to get to a place of joy.
Yeah, I concur with everything Millie is saying. I do see a very clear and direct connection with the child welfare system. We are in the midst of trying to put a task force together to come up with a strategic plan similar to Youth Justice Reimagined, except for kids that are in the child welfare system. So we've got this beautiful blueprint in Youth Justice Reimagined for justice involved young people. We don't have that for child welfare involved. And while DYD, we're a tiny department, right? In comparison to the other, the other departments with 4,000 to 5,000 employees. But we do believe we can be a connector, right, and a support. And the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of the young people that are incarcerated come from, they've had some type of interaction with child welfare. So if we can get our arms around how to support those young people specifically to keep them out of harm's way, I think that's a big area of advocacy. There are convenings around serving foster youth and kids that are in the dependency system, but they often don't involve community in the way that DYD, in the way it was created. So making sure it's not just other county departments, but those departments and community and the young people that are directly affected, the young people and families that are directly affected by that system.
No, we'd be excited to learn more about that. I'm really excited about this translation of child welfare, right? This makes a whole lot of sense, a long-term area of interest for Children's Defense Fund and leadership, especially at a national level, and looking forward to how we can continue to evolve this. But I want to go back to Millie's kind of frame on, like, this is everything. If it's everything, I'm not a lawyer, Millie, you know this. I thought I was going to be one when I was in high school. But one of the rules I learned is you never ask a question in open court you don't know the answer to. But if it's everything, then I think about one of CDF's moonshot goals. So last year we released a five policy zones for our 2030 policy agenda. In the area around education for civic life and work, our moonshot is to lower the voting age to 16. In Tacoma Park, Maryland, for over a decade, 16-year-olds have been voting in municipal elections. In Newark, New Jersey, earlier this year, we had the largest expansion of youth vote that we've had since 1971, because now young people will be able to vote in school board elections and in municipal elections in Newark, New Jersey. Our partners at Generation Citizen and others are leading national campaigns, including in collaboration with some of our state offices, to expand this so that young people, it's not just about advocating for young people in systems, but young people have direct voice, including not just half of those seats on those councils, but electing the people to the councils. Are there places this is the question I don't know the answer to, I should know. Are there places in California where 16-year-olds have the right to vote? Are there opportunities that we might lean into here and connect to some of these national campaigns to make youth voice and youth vote much more powerful campaign?
So I just actually was at Camp Page which is one of our juvenile facilities in Laverne on Thursday. And I was told that you can register to vote as young as 16. I don't think I knew that. It means that you vote when you're 18, but that you can register to vote when you're 16. Which then ensures that young folks who are currently in our system at the age of 16 are given the opportunity to register so that when they are 18, they can, exercise that right. I don't know that it exists anywhere in California. I don't know how much work is happening around that, but I think about kind of sometimes what I see is like a disconnect between I feel like that needs to happen in conjunction with political education, right? And so shout out to the work of Generation Citizen and the work of understanding civics and creating access to civic education and all that stuff, because without that, the right to vote doesn't really mean anything, right? Without knowing that there is so much power in what happens here locally, on the judges that you vote for, on the DA that you vote for, on the sheriff that you vote for, it doesn't mean as much. And frankly, I remember working in the Bronx and trying to register folks to vote, and the number of people who would tell me is not going to make a difference, countless. And so I think there is something to be said about lowering the age, but in conjunction with this work around what it means to vote, what the impact of that is, and how powerful it can be. And then it can't stop there, right? Because you put someone in power, but you still have to hold them accountable. And so creating kind of the energy around that feels wildly important. And I'm not sure that it's something that I have seen, but certainly feels like something that we should prioritize.
Directly answering, I feel like in 2020, there was legislation for 17-year-olds. And it either didn't make the ballot or it didn't pass. I can't remember, but I think it made the ballot and it just didn't pass. So that could use some advocacy, right? That's something that can work. I want to give a shout out to our friends from Hoops for Justice who are in the back. To two amazing things that are relevant to your conversation. One, they work in the facilities. Now you got me not wanting to call them camps and halls because I agree, but I don't have another name right now, so I'm gonna have to figure out another, the place, right? They work in one of the places, and they work with young people who are 17 or older. But the thing that they did, they are fighting being tried as adults, right? One young man is 23 years old. He's been incarcerated since he was 16. And they've been trying to charge him as an adult. These young people have written legislation, two pieces of legislation. One around not trying anyone who did something when they were 17 or younger as adults, period. Based on science around brain development, irrefutable information, right? Data. They wrote this bill, in support. They also are writing a bill about speeding up the process so that young people aren't in facilities for 7 years, waiting just to find out what the next thing is going to be. They also are working with those young people to get them registered to vote. Again, because all of the young people who are 18 or older who are in the facilities can vote because they don't have an adult conviction, even if they have been post-disposition, so after the decision of their case. So that's one of the projects that they're working on. So it is happening, and I know that group of young people, based on their understanding of the system, they're going to vote because they're that involved. So it's happening in pockets, but certainly would love to provide that opportunity to more young people.
Absolutely. We look forward to learning more throughout the day and learning from each of you throughout the day. I want to thank Millie and David for their leadership and our fireside chat. When Myra start getting those signs and notes, then it's time to transition. So I got a sign and I got a note. The note I want to be mindful and thoughtful about because it came from one of my bosses here. But this young person here, let me frame first. A lot of what we're talking about has much to do with possibility and story and impact. And so the note that I got is that there's someone here who wants to share their story about being system impacted. And so, is this you, dear brother? All right. Do you want to come down? Share your name, whatever you want to share with those who are here. These are all powerful advocates for young people. And so they told me you wanted to share, so you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Terrence Sampson. I just want to share a summarized version of my story to show how the youth has been impacted by the criminal justice system. I'm going to start by saying that shortly after birth, doctors discovered drugs in my system, after which I was given up for adoption. And I entered the foster care system. Now, I had a pretty good upbringing, my foster parents, taught me good mannerisms, encouraged me to stay in school, keep up my grades, and go to church on Sundays. And they had me from 5 days old to 14 and a half, after which I entered my second home. And it was at my second foster home that I encountered troubled youth that were into petty crimes. So I began to shoplift and do things of that nature. Children are very impressionable, and so I entered the criminal justice system at an early age, and haven't had the tools and resources that I needed at the time. In addition to guidance, it began to snowball, where I went from shoplifting to robbery and burglaries, right? To fast forward, in my adult years, starting at the age of 21, I committed residential burglary in my youthful folly under the influence, And today I take full responsibility for that, you know, realizing that I'm in control of my thoughts, my words, my actions, you know, and now self-rehabilitated, having gone through the system and having done a long stretch. So the first time I went to prison, they gave me 2 years and 2 strikes. So even as a youth, I was railroaded by the criminal justice system. My case only carried 2, 4, or 6 years max. The judge refused to strike a strike, and you know, it was the fear of the unknown and not being well counseled that I went on. I took the 2 years and 2 strikes, and after serving my term of 2 years, and having not learned my lesson, because at the time they didn't have like rehabilitative programs where we can get the tools we need, you know, to do introspection and to, you know, rid ourselves of vices and adopt virtues that we need, and to remind ourselves that there are healthy alternatives to crime. I reoffended, and as a result, I got struck out. My original sentence was 30 years to life for a non-violent and essentially non-serious crime. There was no physical injury, no weapon usage or possession, you know. And when you look under the Penal Code section of 1192.7, and along with the footnotes, it state what the conditions are that would constitute a serious felony. None of those things applied to me in either case, my first or second term. But I realized that everything happens for a reason, good or bad, and it took me so I actually served 19 years of my 30 to life sentence. And luckily, I merged with some old heads who was on the right track and encouraged me to go to self-help groups where I would be involved in rehabilitative programming. And starting from 2014, I went to CGA. I actually took that course twice. All Life is Sacred, Gogi, you know, and a bunch of other programs. And I took time to build my resume while I was there, working behind the wall, doing PIA, sewing, or PIA fabrics, working in the meat plant. I earned a certificate as a California server. It's a California. It was a serve safe program. I can't call it mine right now. But yeah, so I earned a bunch of certificates that are work related and that reflect my skill set and everything. And so having shown a pattern of consistency with these self-help groups and taking it seriously and gaining the tools that I needed to work on self and encourage others to do the same, I'll no longer see crime as an option. You know, crime is no longer an option, no matter how good or bad I'm doing. Like right now, I'm looking into clinical studies. A lady friend of mine told me about the program there. And so that's one thing I'm looking into. And another thing is the board system. The board system needs rehabilitation because when the 3 Strikes Law was enacted in 1994, it was meant for repeat violent offenders, not for children who did petty crimes. You know. And so when one of the laws passed that increased the age limit to, I believe it was to 23 as youthful offenders, I was able to appear before the board early. I was really eligible in 2009, unbeknownst to me at that time until I received the paperwork. And so I still have to go through the board system regardless of the nature of my crime, you know, being nonviolent and essentially non-serious. So thanks to my rehabilitative programming and being consistent and taking it seriously, I was granted a date. And so now I'm here to share my story with you all. And one of the things that I recall while I was in there is, I believe his name was Anthony Robertson Jr. He said that the biggest civil rights issue we are faced with today is the race to incarcerate millions of Americans for profit, not law and order, but profit, you know? So that's one of the things that stuck in my mind, in addition to an interview that was held by Angela Davis and a person that interviewed her. She said that a lot of the resources that ought to go to education are going to prison. You know, what does that say about our political leaders? You know, we do need a healthy alternatives to crime, you know, because a lot of the youth, troubled youth, are being railroaded through the system, you know, as juvenile offenders and so forth. And even before, even when I was younger, I was sent to McLaren Hall at one point, and which was subsequently shut down. And I have an ongoing lawsuit in court right now because a lot of boys and girls were sexually abused as children, and it became an ongoing thing. And you know, staff members, you know, they use intimidation tactics, saying, okay, if you report this, then we're going to send you to juvie where the boys ain't so nice and things like that, right? And so a lot of people suffered in silence, and it's even in my report. And as a result, we suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Like if I'm around certain types of people, those events will reoccur, you know. And right now, I'm seeking SSI and SSDI in addition to everything else because I need mental health counseling and treatment to kind of suppress it or manage it better, you know. I don't want to make it long and drawn out. It's kind of like I'm pretty much shooting from the hip, but it's a lot of things that took place that are really traumatizing in there on a juvenile offender level and even an adult level, you know. And the same thing that happened to me as a youth occurred as an adult. So I really need help with my SSDI because I'm more than qualified, and I have they did, before my petition was filed on my McLaren Hall case, they had a psych evaluation where where I was interviewed, and they issued a certificate of merit to file along with my petition. And if you were to read my petition, you will see the symptoms right there. And I just need help, and a lot of people that suffering behind prison walls, juvenile detention centers, they need help too. We need more advocates, and you guys are doing a wonderful job. You know, it's good to see that people are on the front line advocating for people that's still in that need help, because it's like you guys are the voice for the voiceless, you know? And we appreciate you.
We appreciate you. So grateful.